those are the moments that you try to recreate as an artist to where it resonates on a level more than that's a cool image.
Lounging, son.
Right, so welcome to the Comic Lounge. Today got an interview with Khary Randolph, the artist on Excellence, one of the best books coming out from Image right now, one of my personal favorites. How's it going, Khary?
I'm doing all right, man. I gotta tell you, this is the first time I've worn a collared shirt in about 3 months. So I did this just for you, man.
Oh man, thank
You
you,
know what I'm
thank you.
saying? I even
Yeah.
shaved up a little bit, just a little.
Yeah, I had to
Can't
throw a
show what's
hat.
underneath the hat right now, but I
I
tried.
can't either. I can't either, man. So first off, let's talk. How did you get into comics? Like,
Uh,
what were some of your first comics?
okay. I mean, I've been into comics since kind of like I could read. My first memory of comics was uh I mean, this is gonna date me a little bit, but my mom took me to see Return of the Jedi, right? So I'm
Hmm.
guessing that was like 1983. It was in the theater. And I was like obsessed with it. I was just like, that was the first time I'd ever seen Star Wars, and like I was just like, yo, that was crazy. And I was always drawing, like I couldn't figure out how to draw anything but the TIE fighters because they
Hmm.
were like basically a circle and like some like little triangles. So I was drawing those constantly. My mom saw that, and so she went to the corner store one day and just saw a Marvel Star Wars comic book, and she picked it up for me. Um, and that was like the first comic book I ever remember reading. Was a Star Wars comic book in like 1983, which makes me about I was like 4 years old at the time.
Okay.
Um, and so I was reading comics, but um, and they were around. Like I was really into like Ninja Turtles and stuff like that when that first popped off. But I didn't really get obsessed with comics until right before Image Comics popped off in like the early 90s. That was like the catalyst for me for like being hooked because there was something about the way those comic books looked that felt so different than everything else that had came before.
Hmm.
I think a lot of it had to do with the color. Like it was so vibrant. Like that was the first time I'd seen like computer colors, and like every page just was like an explosion of like energy and power and like emotion. And I was just like, whatever's going on right here, like I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would go to the comic book shop every Wednesday and just buy everything. Any Image comic that came out, I bought it. Whether it was good or bad or whatever, I bought it. Um, and I've kind of been obsessed ever since.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing you can say about the Image comics. They definitely look good. There's no doubt
Yeah,
about that. Maybe the
yeah.
writing wasn't always
They
so
weren't
good
always
back
good
then.
books
No,
themselves, but they
no,
looked
but
amazing.
I'm not gonna lie. I love me some '90s Image comics. I'm actually that's what I've been doing during the quarantine. No new comics. I was going
Uh-huh.
back in old Image comics. You know what I mean? I got the Max. I got some Spawn, some Savage Dragon, all that stuff. Pit.
That's
Um,
all my joints.
Yeah. So, your style, it has a very hip hop graffiti influence, at least in my eyes. I was wondering who some of your artistic influences
Uh,
are.
every, that's true. I will first of all let's start with that. Yeah, that's very true. Um, my art style, it like I think it kind of my influences change on a regular basis because I'm always kind of taking in new things. But I would say some of my biggest influences, besides the Image guys, were like there was a certain era of like Disney cartoons in the I want to say in like the late 90s early 2000s. Like there was like it was like Hercules and like Treasure Planet and like Atlantis. um it was like this very specific era of Disney movies that all had like the Emperor's New Groove, and
Hmm.
they all kind of had this like angular style to them that like for whatever reason, it really stuck with me, and it kind of reminded me of like a certain kind of graffiti-ish aesthetic. Which while I was actually, it's funny, like a lot of people assume that I did graffiti because I'm like really big into hip hop and because of my art style.
Hmm.
I was never actually like a graph kid like that, but I hung out with a lot of those dudes, and so I feel like that aesthetic kind of seeped into my art style. Um, so it was the image guys. It'd be like a lot of manga stuff that came out. Of course, like Joe Madureira,
Yeah.
Humberto Ramos, guys like that really kind of synced their hooks into what I do. Um, but beyond that, lately, like I kind of have been going back into like some of the illustrators from like before my time. So like I've been getting into more like kind of graphic designy type stuff. So I've been looking at a guy named Saul Bass. And Saul Bass he's like one of the most famous graphic designers of like all time. Like if you a lot of very, very famous Alfred Hitchcock movie posters. If you ever seen the movie poster for Clockers, the Spike Lee movie, that
Hmm.
was like that was either Saul Bass himself or like was heavily influenced by Saul Bass. Um, a lot of the uh, jazz Blue Note album covers of like the 50s and stuff like that. That stuff really spoke to me. So like I've been making a concerted effort to kind of like move away from my comfort zone out of comics into more of like an illustration or graphic design field just because I don't I one of the problems that I have with comics is like after a while when you go to the comic book shop, you look at the covers, they all kind of look the same after a while. And I never wanted to fit in like that. You know what I'm saying? Like I
Yeah.
always wanted to whenever I do a cover for anything, my first goal is, all right, how can I make it so that this doesn't look like every other thing that's out there? How can I make it stand out from like 1,000 other comic books that are on the stands right now?
Hmm.
So that's kind of been my effort the last couple of years to really move away from the pack and do some different stuff.
I mean, I think it's evident with that Juice homage cover you did for this week's issue of Excellence, man. That shit was dope as fuck.
I mean, that was one of those things that was like, I was like, you only certain people would get that reference, but
Hmm.
I knew that if the people that got it would immediately be like, "Oh shit!" Like
Yeah.
those are like the moments that I kind of look for. That like I'm like I'll sneak stuff like that into my comics all the time. Where I'll give you a perfect example. There was a comic book that I did called Mosaic back in like 2015, right?
Yeah.
And in there's a certain scene where they show the main character's apartment, and I put all these paintings on the wall in the background, and the paintings are straight up taken from uh, one of my favorite movies. This movie called Belly.
Oh, I
Uh,
love that fucking movie, dude.
yeah,
Hell yeah.
Belly is one of those movies that like it's like an image comic where like it's all style and visual.
Yeah.
Maybe the writing itself is not that great, but like the visual aesthetic of it like really spoke to me on a certain level. And there's a scene where Nas and DMX are sitting in I think it's Nas's crib, and it's like an all white crib, and
Hmm.
there's like paintings of like a naked black woman, and it's like super high contrast, so she's just black and like I loved that aesthetic so much, and I threw it in the background of one of the pages, and like it wasn't until like maybe a couple weeks ago when people were like, "Yo, you drew Nas's apartment from Belly," and I was like, "See, it took like 5 years, but someone finally got it." And
I
like
need to
those are
go
like the
get that
little
book.
moments. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the minute I saw that cover, I talked to my boy Dylan, who's a part of the site, and I was like, yo, you got to check this shit out. And we both were just like, we even talked about it last week on our podcast that we recorded, how much we love that fucking cover. I
Right,
mean, Excellence is one of our favorite books. I mean, that's why I wanted to get you on the YouTube channel, because this week we're doing hip hop and comics, and I
right.
couldn't think of anyone better to have on the channel. You know what I'm saying?
I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. And so your current project, like we said, is Excellence,
Right.
and how it's gotten really popular. It's been really well received. How has this experience been for you so far?
It's been nuts, man, because like a book. All right, so I've been in comics now for like 17 years. Like I started in 2003, and up until recently, my main focus in comics was, look, I just want to draw cool stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like I just want to create things that like look like those image comics that I grew up on as a kid. I was always trying to create for me when I was like 13 years old. That's my audience. I'm drawing for myself basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with excellence, while it is still that, like I'm still very much like me and Brandon talking. We're like, yo, what's the coolest thing we can put on the page? There's also a side thing to excellence where it's like it's also like a very emotionally personal story to the two of us. Like we put things in that book from our childhoods that like are much more emotionally resonant than anything I've ever drawn in the past. So like I was telling Brandon the other day, like we um we just got the comps for issue 7. You know, we get comps usually like a week or two before the general public does. And I was flipping through it, and it was the first time I had looked through the finished product from front to back. And like, you know, this is like I've been sitting at home in the midst of like all the COVID-19 stuff and like all the stuff going on in the streets right now
Mm-hmm.
with the, you know, Black Lives Matter and everything else. And like I haven't had a comic books come out in months because everything's been shut down. And so to have this book come back out and be the first thing I've gotten in like months, and I'm flipping through it, and there are things that we put in excellence. Like we don't like to be preachy, and we don't have any interest in being like overly political, but at the same time, like we're saying stuff through allegory in this book that speaks to like the general narrative of what it's like being a black person in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just reading through this thing and I'm like, I'm crying, man. I'm like, yo, this is like, I'm like, first of all, you should never be crying, like looking at your own stuff. Like, what kind of asshole am I? Like, being so impressed. But like, also, I'm like, this is crazy that like we have a book that gets to come out in this time that speaks to what's happening in the world right now. Like, I was like, and I hit the team and I was like, yo, I'm so proud of like what we are doing and creating because I feel like this is something that will live much longer than even this book will. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like we're creating the best work we've ever done that will hopefully resonate like years from now, which is like, it's cool. Obviously, like I've drawn a lot of cool shit. You know what I'm saying? Like I've gotten to draw like Spider-Man. I'm doing a Batman cover right now. Like
Mm.
I Teen Titans and this and that and all of that stuff is awesome. But like this book to me is actually way more important to me than that stuff because it has a message and it actually says something. So while it's entertainment, it also I hope people get more out of it than just being entertained, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, completely. I mean, like you said, I think it is a trip that that book happened to drop when it did, because it was supposed to come out before COVID. I think it was supposed to come out in
Well,
May
yeah, it was
or
supposed to come
something.
out in May, and then it got pushed back. At first they pushed it back all the way to July,
Okay.
And then things kind of got shuffled around a little bit, and then it got pushed up into June. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
But yeah,
it came, it was just so timely, you know.
it is. It's a trip, and I definitely get the emotion aspect out of that book. It's more than just surface entertainment. You know what I mean? Like there is a lot of heart, and it's cool to hear that it's not just Brandon. It's both of you. You know,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure that was actually going to be my next question of like how do you guys come up with the ideas for the book? Is it constantly like both of you are plotting this out, kind of, or is it an issue by issue basis?
I'll say this. I will give. I mean, story wise, that story itself is Brandon. Like,
Okay.
uh, he came up with the concept first, and was brought to me like, "Yo, how do you feel about this?" So the core of the story is really like Spencer is Brandon. Like a lot of the stuff in there when it has to do with him and his father and all that, that's Brandon's like history, kind of in a sense.
Yeah.
But what tends to happen is once I start drawing it and I start putting myself into it, like it resonates with Brandon, and he'll start like changing his scripts going forward to accommodate what I put into it. So then it starts to become like the first two or three issues, I'd say, were like very much 99% Brandon, but
Hmm.
it started to be more of a collaboration after that when I started putting my 2 cents in. He was like, and I'd be like, okay, but if we're doing that, well, what about this? And then like I'll give you an example. Um, uh, one of the one of the things about excellence is that there's four laws, right?
Yeah.
And one of the laws is that women are not allowed to uh, do magic. That is a law of this world. It's not. Be clear. It's not. It's not us. It's the world. Um, and when I saw that, I was like, "Hey, yo, Brandon." I was like, "You know they're gonna kill us if we put this out. Like, you know, women can't do magic." And he's like, "Nah, nah. Obviously, we're gonna break that rule." But he was gonna do it much further down the line, and we had a whole long discussion where I was like, we have to, we kind of have to bump that up a little bit because we can't have people thinking that, like this book that's all about race and politics, but we're like sexist. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we have to make it clear to people who are gonna be mad at us on that first issue that like by issue 4 you'll be like, oh, this is part of a greater narrative, and like it's not us ourselves. Like we're our characters are fighting against that system. But that was a plot point that would have been addressed much further down the line. And so we tend to have those discussions, and things get moved around. And there's some characters in issue 7 that I those characters were Brandon's idea, but if you look at the design, they were characters that I came up with a while ago, and Brandon was like, "Yo, that's crazy. We should put that in an issue." And so like he kind of morphed his idea for the characters and his designs that I just came up out of nowhere, just randomly because I saw some cool. I saw some. It was specifically there was these. I saw an article about these African uh metal dudes, like dudes who were into metal, like hardcore metal in Africa. And I was like, yo, these guys look amazing. I was like, we should put some guys like this into the book. And Brandon was like, okay, let me come back to you with that. And then all of a sudden, if you look in issue 7, we have some new bad guys that
Hmm.
kind of have a cool Modi slash kind of punk rock influence on them. And that's, it happens like that a lot.
Can you tease anything that's going to come out in this new arc, without spoiling anything, obviously, but is there anything that you're really excited about that's about to drop? I don't know how far ahead you are on the book.
Um, I'm so issue 7 just came out. I'm on issue 10 now. Um,
Okay.
uh, there's a lot of cool shit going down. Um, I can say I don't want to spoil anything, but the characters that we introduced in issue 7 start to play a big role going forward in the next couple of issues. Like that character, the guy in all white, he's like a very important character to watch going forward.
Okay.
Um, I don't want to say why, because
Oh,
there's 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 there are more hip hop influences coming in the way. Issue
good,
8,
good.
uh, Clockers is also one of my favorite movies, let's
Hmm.
say. And there was a scene in issue 8 that like I was like, if you liked Clockers, or like Menace to Society, like I put that straight into issue 8. That's all I want to say. That's all I
Okay.
can say right now.
Okay.
But
All right.
stay
Cool.
tuned. There's more homages on the way.
All right. Um. So, I mean, this is me speculating, but I've always thought Spencer kind of looked like Nas.
Okay.
Is there anybody you based his look off of in
Yeah.
particular?
Yeah. I mean, Spencer. I mean, that's I didn't think of Nas, but I can totally see it now. Um, when I first started drawing this book, I based it on uh, a younger version of Michael B. Jordan.
Oh, okay.
He
Okay,
was
yeah, yeah. That
he
too.
was the main influence. Um, like we definitely when we cast this book in our heads before we started drawing it. So like every character in the book is based on an actor that we would want to see if there was ever like a movie or something. Um, like the mom is based off of Regina King, for example.
Hmm.
Uh, and so that would he Michael B. Jordan was the influence, but that was even before we started working on it. Before I even saw the Black Panther movie. Once that movie came out, I was like, oh, he can never be Spencer. He's like entirely too grown up and jacked to ever be Spencer. So if we were ever to do a movie or a TV show, he'd have to be like a much younger actor. Um, but yeah, I whenever I'm creating, because I come from like an animation background,
Hmm.
whenever I create a new comic book, I'm always seeing it mentally in my head as honestly like a cartoon that I'm basically screenshotting and putting on the paper. That's what's going on in my brain as I'm drawing these things. So I was definitely looking at him, Michael B. Jordan.
You said you have an animation background. I've heard a little bit about that, but I don't know too much. Can you talk a little bit about that? About some
Yeah,
of your animation stuff?
yeah, sure. So I started in comics in 2003, and then I took a break in '06. And that break came honestly because I wasn't getting enough work in comics to like be sustained to sustain myself financially, right? And um and what happened was I got a call from my friend LaShawn Thomas, who was the main character designer on Boondocks. And he was like, yo, he's like, we need someone who can do this style um, to design characters. Because basically they were running into a problem where a lot of people who were working on the show were very good animators, but like that Boondock style is very tricky to draw
Hmm.
because it's got the anime faces, but it has very realistic anatomical features in the bodies. And a lot of people that they were working with come from like more of a cartoony background. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and so they needed people that could like come from comics and really do anatomy well. And so he's like, your style would be perfect fit. So he got me on basically assisting him doing character designs. That was my first time even thinking about doing animation work. Because while my style, people look at my style and they see animation, like I had no formal training whatsoever. Um, and so I did that. And once you do one project, all of a sudden you get hired for something else. So someone on that project recommended me for, I want to say the next thing was, there was the Hellboy. There was a series of Hellboy animated movies that came out
Hmm.
that were designed by my boy Sean Galloway, and they hit me up to do some design work on that. And then I started doing licensing and design work on the 2003 Ninja Turtles show. Uh, and then from that, all of a sudden, I got hit up to do Wolverine and the X-Men, and that was like a ton of like I was like before I was just helping out, but on Wolverine and the X-Men, I was like actually a part of like the cast. Like I was doing heavy design work on that show. I wasn't the main dude, but eventually for the second half of that season, I was designing almost everything. Um, and so I just kept going from show to show to show, just just randomly. Like there was no plan for that at all. After that, there was a show called Chaotic, which was it was a it was a card game, and it was a TV show that ran for 3 seasons. Nobody watched it, but like I designed the shit out of it. Like um, there was a Voltron show that came out, not the DreamWorks one, but there was
Hmm.
one that came out right before that, and I did some design work on that. I just kept falling into shows over and over and over, like just randomly. And so there was a run of like 4 years where I was doing nothing but animation, and I was just like, the money's good, and all the properties I'm on are pretty cool, so I'm gonna keep doing it. You know.
Yeah. How does working in animation differ from comic book work?
Um, the main there's a couple main differences. That all the stuff I was doing was either design work or storyboarding, right? And when you're on animation, you're part of a team. Your team might be like 15, 30 people. So everyone's touching each part. So I'm someone else might design something, then they'll give it to me. I'll do a pass on it. Then someone else will do a pass on it. So it's very collaborative, and so the final result, even if you have the title of character designer,
Hmm.
5 other people might have also designed that character at the same time. Um, so it's very much you are a part of a bigger thing. Whereas in comics, like the staff of excellence, it's really like 5 people making that book. Like, so your stamp on a comic book is much more clear and defined, and you know exactly what I did. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like on excellence, Brandon's the writer, I'm the artist, Emilio's the colorist, Daron is the letterer, and then we have production. And then like so you know exactly who did what. If you look at Wolverine and the X-Men, you may have no idea who did what. And while that's cool, I think I have an ego, and the thing about comics is like you get props for what you did. You know what I'm saying? Like people know what you did, and like people appreciate that. Whereas you can work on a show that gets watched by millions of people, but no one knows who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like you might get paid better, but like nobody knows who did what on your favorite cartoon. So it's just really about I like the fact that I can kind of have a very defined stamp on what I do. Like my voice is much clearer on a comic book than it is on a show.
So you said you worked on Boondocks, which is a trip. I mean, I love the Boondocks. That's one of my favorite comic strips. Were you a
Yep.
fan of that before working on that show?
Yeah. I mean, I was a fan of it. Um, I read the strip pretty regularly. Um, And when I got on the show, I was like, yeah, that's cool. I mean, but like the show is very different,
That's true.
like, and I remember specifically having conversations being like, there's no way we can air this. Like, there's they don't make some of the stuff they did on that show. I was like, nah, like I'm designing this, but I'm like, nah, there's no way they're ever gonna let this go. Like, I remember specifically there was two things. I remember there was I designed some characters. They were like convenience store clerks, and one of them looked exactly like Saddam Hussein. And I was just like, how would how are they gonna let this how are they gonna let this go? Like these things they were saying, I would read those scripts and I'm like, you can't have these words on a TV show. Like you can't, but they all got through. Like to their credit of Cartoon Network and Sony and them, they let a lot of that stuff fly. Um, and I think as a result, that show was like revolutionary. Like there was nothing like Boondocks before it. Um, and so even though my additions were kind of minor at the time because I was just assisting other people, like I'm really glad to say that I was a part of it, even like a small way.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. All right, so let's talk about hip hop.
Sure, let's
I
talk
was
about
one. I was wondering, do you, when you're illustrating, do you listen to music, and if so, what do you listen to?
it. I listen to music constantly. It definitely depends on the scene. Like I uh, I tend to make playlists, kind of like mixtapes, basically. Like if I know I'm gonna draw a certain type of scene, I will I will make a playlist so that it fits that scene, so I can get in the mood to draw what I'm drawing. Um, since since excellence is it's based in New York City, I very much for the scenes that are just like very New York, I go very Nas. There's a lot of Nas happening. There's a lot of Wu Tang happening. Um, uh, but there are also some scenes where like it goes like real fantasy, and then for then, like I'll go to a different place. Like a lot of times when like Spencer has a temper, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's his thing. Like when he kind of has these like Kill Bill style rage moments where like the screen will just go red and he'll just like wild out. And when that stuff comes on, I'll put on Kanye's Yeezus album just because there's a certain like not give a fuck aesthetic to that album that I appreciate. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Kanye these days for various reasons, but
Yeah,
like I still respect like he went so left on that album and was just like, I don't give a damn. Like I'm gonna just distort the shit out of it and like just like sometimes there will be sounds in that album that just like irritate me and I appreciate it. Like I'm
yeah.
like he's like I'm trying to piss you off right now, and I will try to do the same thing in the artwork when Spencer is just like on a blackout state. Like I want to harness that energy. Um, but yeah, there's a very specific scene where in issue 7 where where Spencer's friend Darian is sitting on a stoop, and it's like it's a very Brooklyn scene. Like it's just like sitting on a like I live in Brooklyn myself, and just like
Mhm.
the stoop is where you just kind of kick back. People sit out there and they smoke like a black and mild, and like, and I just like was like, I need some Nas for that moment, just to like get that real New York ambiance. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Um, so I do tend to play Nas's, specifically Illmatic, the first album, just because
Yes.
I feel like that is the most New York sounding record I can think of. Like sometimes when I need to get in the vibe, I would just like put on that album or like the first Wu Tang album and just like ride the train. to my studio and just like soak that in while I'm like plotting scenes in my head, because I feel like that is the way you're supposed to listen to Nas. Like riding the the Q train uh in headphones, like not in a car. It's got to be in headphones on a subway car. Like that is the way to properly embrace Nas. And I'll just sit there and like soak it in and like figure out how am I gonna plot out this next scene going forward, and then get to the studio and draw it all out.
Well, I just had to add something to my bucket list. I need to listen to Illmatic on the Q train now.
You have to. You have to.
um, so you say you have playlists. Are you gonna throw some of those in the back of an issue of Excellence, or what? Are you gonna let us know?
I've thought about that. That's actually a good idea. Um, I might do that. I don't know why. Like I certainly have thought about it, but for some reason I've never actually posted that in the book itself. Maybe what I'll do is before issue 8 comes out, I will post on my Twitter like, here's a list of songs that I was bumping when this happened for this scene, and I might just that's a good idea. I might do that.
Yeah, please do, because I know a lot of people that would love that.
Yeah.
So let's talk. Who are your favorite hip hop artists? Number one. That's the first, and then the second part of that, favorite hip hop albums.
Okay. Favorite artist. This is gonna. I think hip hop is one of those things where like everyone kind of has like, I'd say like a 4-year window of like, this was my era. Like this is when I listened to hip hop the most,
Yeah.
and when it like touched me the most. And I think for me it was somewhere between like 1992 and like 1996, let's say, right? Like that was my high school years, and that was when like all of my favorite albums for the most part came out. So that was when like Nas's first album came out. That was when Jay-Z's first album came out. That was when Biggie's first album came out. That was when Outkast came out. Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
Trying to think. Those are, and like all those artists that I named right there, those are like, oh, obviously like Snoop and Dre,
Mhm.
Ghetto Boys. Those were like, that would be like my era. I don't know. Did I say Wu-Tang? Probably not. Wu-Tang. So everything from that era, 92 to 96, basically the moment that Tupac died, I was just like, fuck. Like that's when that era stops for me. Um,
Yeah, I see that.
but all those artists and all those albums are like kind of like my golden era, when like that was when everything was the best, and that's even to this day that's the kind of the stuff I listen to the most, like Ice Cube, NWA, all that stuff. Um, I mean, I'm not. That doesn't mean I don't listen to newer artists too. Like as I mentioned, I love. I mean, I love certain eras of Kanye. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I really like Kendrick. Um, I mostly like J. Cole, even though I think he's kind of boring. I like I like the idea of J. Cole, like
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Um, I fuck with Travis Scott. Um, trying to think. Oh, I love Griselda right now, like because Griselda, the whole Griselda movement sounds a lot like a lot of the stuff that I was into in the 90s. I tend to like the guys that are on the darker side.
Hmm.
Um, uh, yeah, those are. Is that all the new stuff I like? That might like. I'm really not into like newer stuff. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Same way. I mean, I've been bumping the same Gangstar album in my car for the past
Yeah,
week. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I've only been listening to Moment of Truth from beginning to end, and when it ends, I got to put it right back to the beginning. So
That's it. Yeah, like it's just like I I I don't like to be one of those old guys who's like, nah, that shit is trash. I don't. I mean, I do think that,
I
but
think.
I think that, but also I recognize that it's not for me. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
for the next generation, that's their music, and I think that it's important that they have their own stuff. I just know that I have a certain era that speaks to me, Um, and to this day, I still listen to that stuff on a regular basis. And I know that definitely makes me seem like an old fogey, but I mean, I am also like 41 years old, so I literally am an old fogey at this point.
I
I'm
mean,
okay with it.
I don't listen to really a lot of the new stuff either. I mean, I think somebody named an artist, and I'm like, who the fuck is that? I can't even remember the name. I was wondering real quick, just for my own personal curiosity, do you listen to any living legends or Murs, Atmosphere, anything like that?
I'll be honest with you, like I'm I'm aware of that stuff. I remember when that stuff was like kind of at its, I mean, it still comes out, but there was a moment when that stuff was like really heavy.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like I recognized it, and I was like, this is quality music, but I never fully got into some of that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
it's good. Um, but I think around that time, that was around like I think around that time I was listening to like a lot of like MF Doom. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Like
yes, I love Doom.
I think that was like really my thing at that moment. Um, but so I recognize it, it's quality, but I can't say I really fully embraced it. Not for any good reason other than I just didn't listen to it.
Yeah, I was just
All,
curious, you know.
although it's funny though, you say that because like a friend of mine showed me a picture of Murs one day, and he was walking around wearing an Excellent shirt, which blew my
Yeah,
fucking mind.
that dude's a
Uh,
huge comic book fan. I mean, him and Slug from Atmosphere, they do Felt together.
yeah,
That's their
oh
side
yeah,
project. And Jim
hmm
Mafu did that comic from
yeah,
Image where he illustrated their whole second album. Each track was
I
like a
remember that.
couple pages.
Yeah. So like seeing Murs in like an Excellent shirt, like I was like, all right, I feel like I should listen to some Murs now because it's only right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, listen to 316.
Okay,
That's a good album. Ninth Wonder produced that album.
okay.
That's just hard as fuck.
Speaking of no, not Ninth Wonder. I want to give shouts to the newest thing I've been bumping a lot. Um, uh, I've been listening to, this is an aside, but the new Freddie Gibbs project with Alchemist
Oh
is
yeah, Alfredo.
real for, yeah, it's fire. I like that a lot.
I haven't heard it yet. I gotta listen to that.
I've been listening to that and the new Run the Jewels project almost nonstop for like the last like week or so.
Nice. I gotta check both those things out. So why do you think that hip hop and comics? I mean, I've done a lot of research for all these posts I'm posting this week, but
Hmm
why do you think that hip hop and comics mesh so well together?
Uh, I have theories. I do feel like hip hop was always like it started as like an underground movement by kids who didn't have much, right? And they made something out of nothing, right?
Hmm.
When you look at the history of comics, it's kind of the same thing. Like all those the guys like Jack Kirby and Stan Lee and the guys that Siegel and Schuster, these were all like poor Jewish dudes from like Jewish ghettos in New York who were creating these characters to kind of like stand up for the underdogs, right? Like a character like Superman, he was built to like basically fight like the Nazis. You know what I'm saying? Like these are
Hmm.
guys who came from nothing, who created this format to kind of make themselves feel bigger, even though they didn't have shit. And if you look at hip hop, it's kind of the same way. It's all guys who kind of came from very humble beginnings and turned themselves into superheroes. Uh, and so I feel like it's kind of like even me, like I was always creating comics like to like I was a nerd. Like we're a lot of comic book people, we're all nerds, man. But like,
Yeah.
we get to live through these alter egos that we create, who are like bigger than life. Um, and on top of that, comics is a relatively, I mean, it's not that cheap anymore, but like, you could buy comic books for mad cheap when I was young. So it was one of the cheapest forms of entertainment that would let you kind of get out of your surroundings and live in this other world for like half hour or whatever. So to me, that was a big deal as a kid, you know, who grew up in the inner city. I wasn't poor, but I certainly wasn't rich either. I had to stay inside a lot because I grew up in the 80s when like, crack was happening, like there was a ton of violence in my neighborhood. So I literally had to stay inside as a form of survival. And so like my escape from what I was living at the time was comic books. That was really how I got away from all of that. And I kind of think it's the same for a lot of people. Like it's a form of escapism where you can live through these characters that are bigger than life, and you can see it like think about someone like Spider-Man. Spider-Man is like he's kind of like a regular dude in a sense. Like he's a superhero, but also he's like a dude with like girlfriend problems who has like problems paying his rent, and like no one really respects him, but like he still like saves the day over and over. That's hip hop as fuck, man. Like that's like he puts that mask on, and like all of a sudden he's like the biggest dude in the world. Like what's more hip hop than that aspect? Like when when I remember specifically when the Spider-Verse movie came out, like that resonated so hard because I was like, that movie understood hip hop and comics more than anything I had ever seen. Like when he said, like, anyone can wear the mask, I was like in tears, man. I was like, yeah, that's right. Anyone can wear the mask, man. Like it was the perfect understanding of hip hop and comics and why they resonate to people in one jumble of like I was like, they got it. They got it. And like it was doing in that movie, they were doing everything that I've tried to do for years, successfully or unsuccessfully. The jury's out on that. But like, I was like, these guys get it. That's what I want to do. Um, and I feel like it's important to kind of create comics for kids like me who also didn't see themselves being represented.
Yeah.
Like I always saw myself in someone like Peter Parker, but also at the same time, like I don't look like Peter Parker. We're not the same. So I do feel like I feel like it's important to represent on that level. To, you know, like just like you said when you saw that cover for issue number 7,
Mhm.
that resonated with you on a certain level,
Yeah.
and a lot of people may not get that, but for the people that get it, they're like, oh shit, he's one of us. Like he understands what we're into. And those, to bring it back around full circle, those are the moments that you try to recreate as an artist, to where it resonates on a level more than that's a cool image. Like, oh, that person is speaking directly to me. Like there's a connection between the two of us,
Mhm.
and it creates a bond with readers that hopefully means they understand what I'm doing, and they stick around.
Oh yeah. So is Excellence the only project that you're currently working on? I know you do covers
Yeah,
also. I know you got those Teen Titans covers that come out.
yeah.
And then you said you're working on Batman, but is Excellence the only project?
Excellence is the only excellence is the only project. All right, let me reframe that. Excellence is my day job.
Okay.
It's the thing I do every day. I always have a couple different side hustles, just because I think I have ADD and I get bored drawing the same thing over and over and over. So I always try to do a couple different things on the side. Nothing too major, but stuff just so that I can come back to excellence and feel fresh. Um, so for example, I just did like a short Harley Quinn story for DC based in the Metal universe,
Okay.
which is coming out in July. Um, and as you mentioned, I'm doing covers for Teen Titans. I'm still doing covers for the series Black and its sequel White, which is coming out later on this year. Um, yeah, I have that Batman thing that I'm probably not supposed to talk about, so we'll leave it at that. But
Okay.
that's coming down the pipeline. Um, so and I'm still also kind of like planning for the future, because like excellence is gonna end one day, and and I want to tell more stories, um, like excellence in the sense that resonate on a deeper level than just typical punching dudes in the face. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I've done that portion of my life, and that's what like when you see me doing those covers for Marvel and DC, whoever now, that's just fun for me to get that out of my system. But if I was to be 100% honest, I don't see myself doing a lot of interiors for Marvel and DC in the future. I feel like my goal going forwards is creating new stuff. Um, I feel like those companies have 1,000 artists that can continue those books, but if you want to make a mark, I feel like you got to create new stuff. Uh, and so that's why stuff like excellence is just kind of like a start for me. Like I'm working on more things that'll get announced later on in the future that can kind of speak similarly to younger kids, um, to kids who are, kids of color, to kids who love hip hop, to kids who kind of like I don't. The problem that I see with comics right now, a lot of it tends to speak to a small audience, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of that audience tends to be like over 30, which fine. I don't have I'm over 30. I read comic books, but at the end of the day, I don't actually make my stuff for that. I want to make stuff that resonates with younger kids and teens, and so I'm looking for ways to kind of speak to that audience more and more going forward because I think it's clear that like the kids need guidance, man. Kids need morals, and the way the world is right now, we have to create content that like creates better human beings. You know what I'm
I,
saying? Like,
I agree.
I see stuff happening right now, and I'm like, yo, who taught you? Like, where did you learn some of the stuff you're coming up with? Like, because the morals I was given or don't seem to be reflected in a lot of people right now. Like just in terms of like being a good human being and having compassion for other people. So I feel like it is kind of like as a artist who's kind of getting older, I have to have something to say now. My 20s and my 30s was all about drawing cool shit. Now I think it's more about creating stuff that's fun, but also having something to say so that the next generation of kids and creators will learn from that and hopefully create better human beings.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree. I mean, I was gonna kind of ask you uh about your opinions on what's going on in the world. I mean, I'm a dad, and you know, I mean, yeah, I'm white. You know what I mean? Like, so I can't relate on certain levels. I mean, I'm Jewish, so I kind of sometimes hear stuff like that. Like people crack a joke thinking it's
Sure.
funny or whatever. But
Yep.
I don't understand. But what I do know is that I have a 5-year-old daughter. I don't want her to grow up in a world like this. It's
Right.
2020, bro.
Right.
This shit should not still be going down. What's happening? Well, the protests, yeah, it's dope. You know what I mean? Like people are trying to like incite change, but then you have the news where they're only showing the bad parts. Like
Yeah.
show the good part. You're showing the people looting. You're not showing like the people that are trying to incite change. And it also
Right.
starts with our leadership. You know, the guy at the top of the chain needs to be removed. If you know what I'm saying, you know what I mean? Like we need somebody
Yeah.
fresh in there. We took a step down from President Obama to this douchebag. You know, I mean, I don't mind calling him a douchebag. I can't stand the dude. I
Hey, you
hate
know
what
what?
he's.
I'm not offended by that, sir. I might tend to agree with you on that. He's a douchebag. I'm sorry if you are listening right now and you are not fond of me saying that, but I'm pretty sure looking at me, you could guess what my politics are. Like, it is what it is. Um, yeah, I just I I tend to try to be optimistic in general because I do see that uh, I can see a difference between the way people were when I was a kid and the way people are now. And so I think that progress is on an upward slope in general, but you're gonna have peaks. And I feel like whenever you have change for the good, there's gonna be a bit of a pushback. And so right now we're in a bit of a pushback phase. Um, I think in general though, uh, I try to think that people are good overall, but sometimes you need a nudge, man, to be like,
Yeah.
yo, you should get outside your box and think about what other people are going through that don't look like you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's important to not think about you. Um, so even when people say things that I don't understand, because I don't just like you said, you don't know what it's like, being black. I don't know what it's like being a woman or gay or trans. I can't relate to that, but like I feel like it's important to listen to what other people say and be like, all right, acknowledge that, and let's push towards like us all being on the same playing field. You know what I'm saying? It's not cool when certain people have rights that other people don't. That's my political statement. I don't feel like that should be all that provocative,
Hmm.
but it seems like right now that it is. Treat people like you would want to be treated. Like I feel like that is a rule we can all live by. And if
Yeah.
you have a problem with that, then honestly, I feel like you can kick rocks. Like that's
Yeah, I
it.
agree. Yeah, I mean, I think
You know?
it's pretty much common sense to
Yeah.
just treat others how you want to be treated and have respect for your fellow man, you know?
Yeah, don't be a dickhead, man. Like
Yeah.
it's so easy to do. Like I promise you, not being a dickhead is real easy. And like it's kind of nice not feeling bad about doing shit to other people. Like not holding other people down. It's kind of cool, man. You should give it a shot. It's nice. It's
Yeah.
nice
And then one more question before we get out of here.
for sure.
You said you got some other stuff you want to do. I was wondering, do you want to try your hand at writing too? Do you plan on doing that in the future? Writing your own project?
Yes. Um that's I that is my ultimate goal. I mean, every project I do, I feel like I tend to do more writing than the last.
Hmm.
I still have a ways to go. So I'm sure the next couple projects I will be collaborating with other people who who look at the end of the day, like if someone can do something better than me, I'm gonna let them do it. Like just like I can color comic books. I know how to color. I know color theory. But when I pass something to my boy Emilio, who's the colorist on Excellence, he's gonna do a better job. Like it just is what it is. I can kind of art direct it, but like he is a wizard when it comes to color. Um, but yes, I'm always practicing my craft so that I I never want to feel like um, I have to rely on other people to get my voice out. Uh, so there is a day coming when, yes, I will be writing things myself. Um, and I can tell you right now, some of the next things that I do, I will probably be credited, well, I will be credited as a co-writer. Just that's that's my plan going forward. But eventually, yes, I would like to. I want to do everything. You know, like I want to write. I want to get back into animation at some point too. You know, I want to do a lot of things. I'm still young in my brain, so I have a lot more plans than just doing this. You know.
Yeah. And lastly, can you share with all the listeners where we can find you? Maybe throw in some social media plugs.
Yeah. I try to make it as easy. So all of my is literally just my Khary Randolph. So if you even Google me, you'll see my Twitter, you'll see my Instagram. Don't follow me on Facebook. Like I'm barely on there to begin with, but like Instagram and Twitter are kind of like my main places that I hang out at.
Hmm.
So if you want to interact with me, say what's up to me. If you like my stuff, if you don't like my stuff, let me know, man. Be respectful, but I am open to feedback. I'm always trying to get better. So if I do something and you're like, no, it's just whack, you can let me know. I'm fine with that. You know,
All right, cool. Khary, thank you again for coming to the Comic Lounge and talking with me today.
my pleasure, man.
And talk to you soon, man.
Yo, likewise, man.